Good evening, one and all. Very warm welcome to the panel discussion on crisis management in AISS 2021. I invite the Mr. Siddharth Vishwanath, Leader Cybersecurity and Risk Consulting Partner PwC, who will be the moderating this session. And I welcome you, sir. I invite Mr. Cherin Samuel, Research Fellow, Manwar Parikar Institute of Defense Studios and Analysis. I welcome you. I welcome Mr. Ashutosh Bahuguna, scientist certain. I welcome you, sir. I welcome Dr. Arti Noor, Senior Director, CDAC. I welcome you, ma'am. And finally, I welcome Ms. Mitali Sharma, Corporate Head, Risk Compliance and Information Security, STG Software. I welcome all of you. Over to the moderator. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. Hi guys. I'm sort of looking forward to the opportunity of being part of this August panel, and I think we've got great stalwarts from the industry who is sort of joining me. So maybe let me kickstart. With you, Aarti. Aarti, maybe if you could share with all of us on how you are seeing the threat landscape play out, in terms of the kind of breaches, and what's your perspective?
Uh, Thank you very much for the opportunity. Uh, Cyber crisis is a crisis related to cyber attacks, which specifically target the digital heritage, technical infrastructure, or information system of an individual, organizations, critical infrastructure organization of a nation. What I feel that the threat landscape 2021, if I talk, it is around eight threat groups. That is ransomware, malware, cryptojacking, email related threats, threats against data, against availability integrity, disinformation, misinformation, and also during this 2 years, last 20 and 21 days, non-malicious threat is also on increase. Presently, what I feel is that highly sophisticated and impactful supply chain compromises increased lot of solar wind supply chain like compromise that colonial pipeline, even in India, Telangana and AP power utility hacked. So all these are on too much increase. Then again, one more threat which I am seeing is the business email compromised, and that is, I think, because due to this COVID, there is a transition from traditional system to online. Lot of people are going digital. So because of that, lot of threats, I'm feeling that they are increased. Similarly, due to this COVID situation, vaccines, hospitals, and medicines. So there are a lot of misinformation, disinformation type of threats. I'm feeling that are there. And non-malicious incident, I'm telling because people are going to online and they are doing so many human errors, system misconfiguration type of the things, and because of that, there are so much increase in the cyber crisis or cyber attacks. So that is from my side.
No, thanks. I think some great points around business email compromise, but I think the point on supply chain, very, that's really on point. I think there've been so many supply chain led attacks, especially in the last 1.5, 2 years. Absolutely, thanks, Aarti, for that. Mitali, your perspectives?
So, Siddharth, I think Dr. Aarti has covered it very rightly that, the threat landscape has completely changed from what we used to have as crisis management. Like we used to think of on-prem things like fire, earthquake, or, some disasters that happen or some kind of strikes. From that, the threat landscape has completely transformed since the time this pandemic has hit us. The preparedness for that pandemic and moving towards the remote working, moving towards a landscape where digital transformation is taking place, a lot of applications migrating to cloud. So those ransomware attacks, email breaches, if we look at Verizon breach investigations report, We look at so many things coming out like phishing, social engineering, some of those malware attacks, some of those planned attacks coming and becoming a part of the threat landscape and completely transforming the way we used to do our business continuity and crisis management. So that's what I feel, Siddharth.
No, you're right. I mean, I think we've also got to. I mean, the world has changed in the last 24 months, and I think we've got to rethink how the cyber agenda of organizations also need to shape up. But I'll come back to that point in a bit. Ashutosh, your perspectives on the threat landscape, please.
So based on the incident response activities, what we are having at certain on 24/7 basis, I will list the four prominent, the trends or cyber threats we observed. The first is, of course, the broad categories already covered is the ransomware. But today it's not only ransomware, but it's moved to the cyber extortion. Where in the earlier ransomware it was only encryption of the data, but today they are taking the victims for the double extortion and triple extortion by the holding that data leak and personally identifiable information for the ransom. Another trend in the ransomware is like earlier we have a auto spreading kind of thing like WannaCry, but today the Rebel kind of ransomware, it's more on human operated. So they are looking for the high value targets or the critical infrastructure only. It's not the auto spreading kind of the thing. So we have seen 150% rise in the cyber extortion cases in 2021 than the 2020. Another trend, of course, the supply chain is there, and that's the very complex issue to solve, both based on the hardware-based supply chain and software supply chain issues. Another aspect, what we see is the second attack based on the data leak and the data they sold on the dark web, like car data, like authorization and authentication information of the remote connectivities or the network access and infrastructure access of this thing. What we are more in the third category I would like to share is that what we are looking at the future is that the impact through the cyber to the physical world, as we call the cyber physical security, as we are connecting our physical world with the cyber space, and then the kind of the crisis if there is an attack on our essential services and the things critical services like the health and others. So that's some of the the trends we observe in our this thing day-to-day activities. Thank you.
Ashutosh, I think you brought out some really good points, and I think the last point is very, very important to take note of, which is how increasingly we are seeing a lot more impact to the physical world. So cyber attacks. I mean, we knew of the fact that cyber attacks could be targeting physical world, but we are seeing more of that. I mean, the colonial pipeline was a classic example where the physical world got impacted because of a cyber attack, and I think we're only going to see more of that, and therefore the entire focus around operational technology security and IoT security, I mean, which will probably get embedded into our households as well as we move forward, right? Automated cooling systems, etc., etc. I think the whole world, I mean, the cyber impact of cyber in our lives will sort of transform quite a lot. So I think that's a great point, Ashutosh. Thanks for that. Mr. Cherian, would be good to get your perspectives as well.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be back at the AISS and to be on this panel. I think we will all have pretty much the same laundry list of threats that we are seeing, the usual run-of-the-mill nation-state threats, supply chain, IoT, SCADA security. Now you added to that, you have the hybrid workforce security and disinformation also coming up, as well as, of course, supply chain. And I think, as was mentioned by the other panelists, ransomware seems to top all this because it's reached unprecedented levels of sophistication. I think largely propelled by the high levels of profit for the cyber criminals. So I was reading that they are even buying up 0 days these days in order to carry out fresh attacks. And at the nation state level also, you see that ransomware attacks have taken up focus. You had the United States, conducting a counter ransomware summit last month, I think, where one of the sessions was led by India and the our National Cybersecurity Coordinator had highlighted the menace of ransomware both in India and globally. And well, what surprises me here is that despite reports saying that 86% of attacks happen in India, you really don't see too many reports coming out, unlike abroad. And also, I read that a lot of these ransomware attacks in India are domestic in nature, which I think would make them easier to deal with, unlike attacks coming in from abroad. But there you have it. Of course, the other main threat, I think, comes from the sudden move to working from home, which has been seized by threat actors as an opportunity to target organizations, individuals through this channel, since they are not as secure as organizations. And IoT devices also not much talked about, but I think penetration of IoT devices has led to them being a new attack vector. Almost like SCADA devices, there's very little visibility on their security. I have about 15 to 20 odd IoT devices throughout my home, and I don't see them being updated very often, if at all. So it's a whole, I think, basket of threats that we have these days. Thank you.
Sure. So I think, you talked about two things that struck a chord. One is, this entire piece around IoT devices and how that's going to proliferate in a big manner. I think there's some I don't know what the number is today, but I remember at some point in time, say 10 years back, there were predictions that by 2020 there would be 50 billion IoT devices. I really don't have a count as we speak today, but the point is just the order of magnitude, right? I mean, basically we are talking about a multiplier of about 6 to 7 per individual in terms of IoT devices. So that's huge, right? And if that's the kind of scale that we're going to operate in, I think cyber attacks on that frontier could be devastating. I think the other interesting piece that you mentioned, Mr. Cherian, is the entire piece around disinformation. Very often we don't recognize that as a cyber event, but in many ways that's also a cyber event, and that could cause a lot of impact of a different kind. So we'll come back to that point again in a while. So we'll come back to this disinformation and and IoT in a while. So let's sort of change gears here. Maybe Mitali, I'll start with you. So given that we live in a world where either organizations have been breached and they know about it, or have been breached and they don't know about it, or are waiting to be breached. What should organizations be doing? And what's this entire piece around crisis management, which is the topic of today's discussion? I mean, what does it really mean to you?
Right. So, so at the end of the day, it's all about data that is there in the organization, which is critical to organization. It could be sensitive data, confidential data, which gets compromised. Some companies would agree to it. Some organizations would come forward and say that, yes, we were breached. Some of them would not even say that they have been breached, and some are still, in that thought process that we may or may not be breached. They don't know about it, as you rightly said. So, as an organization, why crisis management is important, is critical, is because you need to understand what you need to protect. So I would say some key elements would be, you first need to know what is the crown jewel of my organization. What are those things that I really need to protect? In my organization, what would those things be? Will it be my infrastructure that I need to protect? Will it be my data? Will it be any critical projects, any critical applications that I'm working on? So any sort of information. So first I need to identify that first, what I need to protect. And after that, like in your houses also, you would put your jewelry in lockers. Why would you do that? Because you want to protect it. So similarly, as far as crisis management is concerned, for organization, it would mean first understand what is your threat landscape, what threats you are dealing with as an organization. If I am in a seismic zone, if my organization is in a seismic zone, so probably the biggest crisis for me would be an earthquake. So first I need to understand what I need to protect, my crown jewels. Moving ahead, I need to understand what do I have to protect it? How do I protect it? Where do I go to? I mean, what would be the process around it? So, as part of the crisis management, the way it starts is you do the risk assessment or the threat assessment of your environment. You understand what is the risk, what are those threat vectors that you need to comply with. After that, you plan what would be my plan, what would be my continuity plan or my contingency plan around this. Let's say if I get stuck with an earthquake, or recently we all got stuck with the pandemic, which is COVID, and all of us had to move from a physical working environment to a completely remote working environment. So assessing that, having those business continuity plans around you, not just having those plans, having the right communication plan and the right teams to handle it. Because what happens is, in organizations, sometimes you would have you will have best of the plans in place, you would have those in paper, but you really don't know how to execute it. So until and unless you have those right skilled resources to handle it, until and unless they know when to communicate and how to communicate, I think that is very critical. And then comes the testing of that plan. Have you ever tested that plan or not? So I think those would be the elements that you should think of when it comes to crisis management, and that's the reason why it is important and critical for an organization.
Sure, Mitali. So, I mean, clearly the points that you're making is you need to be aware of what's your crown jewel. I think that's more from a protection perspective, but really, in terms of crisis management, you're saying we need to have a plan, we need to have the right skilled people, and we need to be testing the plan from time to time on
Exactly.
various scenarios. So, I think absolutely. I mean, those are important building, sort of pillars to build your entire
I
crisis
mean,
management.
crisis, you would not know, when suddenly the crisis would happen, but at least you should know what do I need to protect first before I move out. Suppose my house is on fire, I should know what should I take before I have to leave out of the house.
Sure. No, I think that's a great point, and therefore your point that you were making earlier, which is first organizations need to know what the crown jewels are. So therefore,
Yes.
in a situation of crisis, we know what to protect first as a I
And
mean
you would know
prioritization.
what to resume first as well, based on
Sure.
your identification.
Sure, sure. I think great points. Thanks, Mitali. Uh, Ashutosh, any perspectives on how what is a crisis? I mean, how is a crisis defined from a cyber perspective? And then maybe some reflections on what Mitali said and what else should organizations be doing.
Okay, so here I mean I will answer this from the organization perspective as well as the how at a national level what initiatives and efforts is done by CERT India. So the first thing is about the crisis, like you asked. It's a crisis when it's an unknown. It's not known. Otherwise, we used to call it an incident. So how to manage the unknown if we are not aware about it? So that's the challenge. So two main obstacles in the cyber crisis is that the chaos and a panic, and how to manage that. So first thing that we suggest is that you should have and must have the approved plan in place that will provide you the framework and the practice that what are the roles and responsibilities of the different hierarchy within the organization, how you should react, other who will take the call. So we must have the plan. The first and second aspect is that when we have a plan, we will not wait for a crisis to happen to test it. So we need to have some sort of the exercises and drills on a regular basis. So what I want to say that create a plan and have a regular testing of that plan. And then when you play with the lot of the crisis during the exercise scenario, then even if something unknown come, at least your nerves are calm and you are able to manage the situation and control the situation, and you can keep the interruption at a minimum. So another from the national perspective, from the India, that we have a national cyber crisis management plan which is developed by CERT India, and it's mandated by government that all the organizations and sectors need to develop their own plan. So we help and assist them that you create your plan in line with the national plan, so that you are a part of the national incident response tree. You can of course do something at your own, but if you are integrated with the national incident or crisis management plan, then you know where your friends are, what are the roles and responsibilities of different agencies, how to deal with the international vectors involved in the crisis. So we help them, we enable them. We have a specific cyber crisis management workshop on the topic where we help them to create their own plan. And so more than 60 exercises we conducted around crisis management. with the organization and entities, and training more than 700 organizations. So that's through these exercises, providing the templates and providing the guidelines, providing that framework, and then testing and practicing is that what I think is the the way to go forward for organization. And of course, keep it in line with your sectoral and regulated expectation and national with the expectation of national bodies. Thank you.
No, so thank you, Ashutosh, for sharing all of this. And I think, yes, absolutely, CERT has been very central to how the government is supporting the entire industry on crisis management, etc. So I think that's absolutely there. So Ashutosh, maybe I'll ask you a few questions here, right? So I mean, clearly you're helping organizations, from a training perspective. You're helping organizations also to provide a framework so that they can build their crisis management plan, etc. But let's sort of game the situation, right? I'm the CISO of an organization, and I got breached last evening, right? And I wake up in the morning. I mean, and I sort of at eight in the evening, I know that I've been breached. There's a SOC alert that gets generated. We are not able to figure out how the perpetrator has entered in. Maybe there's some data. There's a ransomware going on. He's talking about, we've got a ransom notice, etc. How should we be responding? What support can we expect from certain? I mean, this will just be. I mean, while I have some perspectives, but it'll just be helpful for everybody to hear from you.
Okay, so we have a 24/7, as I said, 365 days incident response, and that's our, the primary activity to provide the support during the crisis on handling the incident from the domestic and international vectors also. So similar activities we are doing at the international, at the like the Asia Pacific CERT level and the global forum like Forum for Incident Response Teams. So through those forums, there are the national agencies and CERTs work with each other, and we have a protocols and memorandum of understanding to help each other. So especially in case of because in all cases, most of the cases, the international vectors are involved. So of course, you can utilize those channels. We have a threat intel from various sources, which the CERT to CERT exchange come up, and through lot of the sources we collect those information. We can provide those tools because everything is not published in the public domain due to some restrictions and the conditions of the source. So through those channels and our technical help desks, and we are getting maybe the similar incident and similar case study from other sources. So we are helping out the organization to come from the incident. That's the one perspective that what we try to build in a public-private partnership also, and what CERT try to do for the community. We want to be trusted referral agencies where the organization report the incident. But another aspect from the legal perspective, from the Information Technology Act to Amendment 2008, it's mandatory to report the incident to the CERT India. So, by law, by legal requirements, the organization also should not hide. Cannot hide the incident. And why that requirement is that because that incident and that analysis help other in the sectors, other in the country to to come over the attack or help us to prevent them. So that's good for your
Sure.
question.
No, thanks, Ashutosh. Maybe Aarti, it'd be good to hear from you as well, Dr. Aarti, which is, what is CDAC doing around crisis and, sort of strengthening the country's cyber posture.
Uh, so being a R&D organization, I divide this in two parts. One part is related to research development, that means product development, and second part is related to capacity and capability building. So a lot of solutions CDAC is developing, already developed and developing in this area. In cyber forensics, we have a very good tools for all to help the once crime is there, to help them to identify the things. Then we have also developed some endpoint security solutions for application whitelisting software type browsers, then protect from JavaScript based threats, mobile kavach type of the thing, so that we can provide the solution to the user. USB pratirudh we have developed, network intrusion detection and prevention applications. In addition to that, we are also putting continuously effort to make a lot more sophisticated products, so that the type of attacks nowadays happening, we can address them. In addition to that, for capacity and capability building, we have developed different type of the platform frameworks. Like we have a simple awareness program to aware each and every level, starting from school children to the housewife to government officials. And side by side, we are also developing the sophisticated platform for critical infrastructure organizations, capability building, so that people come over here, they can work on the live environment, they can feel, experience the live attack, and then learn the defending them. So SCADA type of the test bed is available, in which we give the live scenario over there, how attacks are happening, what actions you have to take, and then how to defend it. Similarly, we have also did a project cyber closet, in which we are making a architecture, and any organization's architecture we can replicate on that, and we call the participants to identify the type of attack, the vulnerability in your architectures you are having, and then learn the defense mechanism. So that type of in both R&D as well as capacity capability building, CDAC is working.
So, ma'am, I think you made some, I mean, you sort of articulated very well some of the efforts and support that CDAC is bringing to the table. I mean, a question to you is how, as a private sector client, a private sector organization, can I take benefit of any of this, right? Whether it's a forensic tool that you spoke about, or the OT security simulation that you talked about. So how could an organization get benefit?
An organization can approach the CDAC, and then these facility can be provided to them for hands-on practices. So it is possible they can come, and they can the facility is available to them. In fact, we are going towards the services mode also, so that these are available as a service. So like we have developed a cyber range type facility. So if any industry wants, we can provide this cyber range as a service to them, so they can themselves do, or if they need help to CDAC to understand the things, so we can also we can provide the help to them by through training. And it is available in both online, offline. They can come to the CDAC center, and even if they want through online mode, they can do.
Sure. No, I think it's helpful, and this some of this is indigenously built as well, as I
Yeah,
understand.
yeah.
Okay, excellent, excellent. I think it's great, and it's sort of great for private sector, public sector to take advantage of what CDAC has created. So great. I'll sort of change gears again, and Mr. Cherin, let me bring you in. Tell me. So we spoke about what organizations ought to be doing. Mitali touched upon that, and we heard from Ashutosh and Dr. Aarti about the way CERT could support organizations, or CDAC could support organizations. So I think that's useful. If we were to take the whole conversation to a country level, right? So how would you define a crisis in the context of a country like India, and what does the institution, as in the government institution or the country, need to do to respond to a crisis, or what do they need to? How should they prepare? I mean, some perspectives on that element, please.
Yeah, I think, well, just going back to the crisis management plan, gaming it is a very good way of figuring out whether it actually, I mean, if I were to play devil's advocate, I'd say that this is something that came up, many decades ago, and I sometimes wonder whether it is applicable for the current situation. Um, I've hardly come across any reports that say that an incident took place and the crisis management plan was put into effect, and that's how the crisis was overcome. Um, as far as the country level is concerned, I would say that we now have at the national level a much larger number of organizations than we had, say, a decade ago. And part of the the aspect here is that we should be better able to coordinate how all these organizations work with each other, which is a very important aspect of crisis management at the national level. When you have so many organizations, who has the responsibility to do what, then whether it should be central. These are what you see happening in other countries also, whether it should be centralized or decentralized. The more centralized it is, the longer time it takes to respond. So a decentralized system might be better. Then this whole issue of, when does an incident rise to a crisis? Because at the national level, most of these, what you see these days are, they just happen at the incident level, and companies and organizations are also interested in tamping down, because if you have government agencies coming in, then they kind of think they lose control of the situation. Then they'll have liability issues, which is not really an issue in the Indian context, I think, as much as it is abroad. So I think one problem is that there are very few clearly defined indicators of what constitutes a cyber crisis from a country perspective. If you look at other countries again, if you take the Czech Republic, their Cybersecurity Act has emergency provisions which say that this is what happens when the government gets expanded powers. I think you would have read recently about the Australian Cybersecurity Security of Critical Infrastructure Act, which was just amended. This was in 2018. It was amended a couple of weeks back. That also allows the government to take over critical infrastructure in worst case scenarios. But here also the definitions are not very clear. So what constitutes the worst case scenario, they have not mentioned. And so there's a lot of pushback against this. So even something as simple as a cyber crisis and management of it can be quite complicated from a country level. And yes, so I think I'll stop there. But what needs to be done, like I said, all these lead organizations have to come together, whether it's NCIPC, CERTIN, NCSC. Because if there's confusion at that level, or if their powers are not clearly defined, then that would that would have knock-on effects.
Right. No, Mr. Chairman, I think you make a very, very important point, and that point is that I guess what is a crisis at a country level needs to be defined, and those scenarios need to be called out. So, for example, would a power grid being brought down for 5 minutes, is that a national crisis when it comes to cyber? Or a power grid being brought down for 2 hours and above would then escalate into a national crisis where the government machinery comes into play. That's one example, right? Or for that matter, scenario 2 could be the traffic systems all get jammed for more than 15 minutes. That could be a crisis as well. It may not be a national crisis, but it's a city level crisis or whatever. But I think some of these elements probably need to be thought. A little more thought needs to be given, or we need to reflect a little more around these things. And in each of the scenarios, what machinery, what entity needs to kick in, and how do they need to support the entire response? I think that's absolutely important, and I think that's increasingly becoming more important with the kind of geopolitical the way geopolitics is evolving across the globe, including our own neighbors, right? So I think that's important. Maybe I'll ask you another question, Mr. Cherian, which is you spoke about IoT and how IoT is going to change the life lifestyle, let's put it like that, lifestyle of individuals, right? I mean, you'll have connected cars, you'll have connected homes, etc., etc. Now, if there were an impact, a cyber event that impacts that IoT infrastructure around which we as humans either operate at home or at workplaces, etc. What's your advice out there, and how what sort of frameworks probably need to come into play to ensure that crisis of that kind that impact individuals does not happen, or we can respond to it effectively?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have an answer to that because IoTs are such strange animals. I mean, we are yet to, I think, wrap our heads around IoTs and what kind of implications they have. And it doesn't help so much a lot that when the threat scenario is always your fridge will start to send out emails. So all the kind of hype is there, and so I would actually like to hear your thoughts on this because I'm sure you have thought about it more than me.
No. I mean, I can obviously sort of share my thoughts, and I can I'm sort of thinking aloud as well to some extent.
Yes.
But I think the point is that, look, we do talk about awareness. Awareness creation for individuals, and obviously as part of that awareness, I mean, even forget about IoT, the basic do's and don'ts of what you got to do or what you not should not do as individuals, right? For example, you shouldn't log into a free Wi-Fi at an airport, and there are so many do's and don'ts. Awareness of that itself is limited today. But the reason why I brought up this IoT story is because when that IoT kind of crisis happens, it's not just about data theft. Our physical environment will get impacted, right? We could be locked out of our own homes, for instance. I think there's a lot more. There are frameworks that need to be built around how could individuals respond in such situations. Maybe we need to create infrastructure, helplines, because some of that will be required as we move forward, because it's not easy for me to reach out to the OEM and ask the OEM to fix, like if LG is the one who's got smart locks for me, to say come and fix it, right? I mean, if there's something, because I may have to deal with 7 OEMs. So I mean, there'll be I think there's a combination of awareness and combination of infrastructure that may need to get created in the future as we evolve into that world. But maybe would be good to get Ashutosh, your perspective also on this topic.
Just before that, this Microsoft security threat report that came out recently, that had a whole section on how the bad guys are now entering companies by going through the IoT of the home networks of employees, and then transferring their malware onto the laptops, and then entering the company networks. So that's how convoluted it gets. And as to the other second part, that was a very voluminous report. And at the end of it, all they could say was, what is the advice they give? Follow basic hygiene practices, like you said. So it all comes back to that ultimately.
Sure. No, absolutely.
What we are talking about is as we understand that IoT at our home, at place, and everywhere. And moving forward with 5G, we will be connecting more and more of our societies and life with on the internet. So the question is that definitely the awareness is one aspect, but what I look it from the the behavioral aspects of the cyber security. That's called the why. Even after having we understand the cyber hygiene things, but why we are still not patching our system within a time? There is some issue with the human behavior. We are not thinking rationally, or so from that aspects, how we can shift the behavior of the people to the more the security aware, we can say, the behavior. So that aspects we have done some research to understand the people behavior, that how we can make, because the one-sided classroom and the sharing of some do's don'ts is not working and is not effective. So how really we can shift their behavior on that aspects? Some work we are doing, and we are because that okay, we can have a cyber crisis management plan for our organization, but do we also expect a crisis management or incident response plan for non-IT people and everybody to be at their place? so that they can protect their devices. You see the common problem and trends that how we can patch and push the patches and release the advisory at that huge level, at the level of the citizens. That's the really the challenging aspect. Another dimension is that the breaker bot and some related to IoT related bots. What they did is that they exploited a simple vulnerability. That means that it's not properly configured and default username password is there. So there is some research also going on how to make them secure by default. That means that when it is a first installed, then how we can choose the configuration and can have a golden copy or a secure copy or secure configuration on that setup. So these two, three aspects I see that how we can do the behavioral cyber security and change the behavior of citizen and people and employee. Another aspect is that what I look is that how as a home we created a new network, so how to protect that. And third is that can we have uh, the default secure configurations of those devices when we are moving to the IoT. And one just last point from the last discussion for sake of the audience, these crisis at a national level is defined in policy and national crisis management plan, and it says the national crisis is that if the attack or cyber attack is having impact on national security, public health, public safety, and economy. If these aspects are getting impacted through cyber attacks, then it's declared as a national crisis. Of course, the sectors and states and organizations have to define their own, because something is more critical for other things are critical for their business requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thanks for that insight as well. So maybe I'll just quickly maybe get one quick rapid fire response from each of you. Okay, if there's one message for individuals from how should they secure themselves, what would that message be? So, Mitali, let me start with you.
So, as in, like you're saying about an individual or an organization?
Individual.
Individual. Okay, so as an individual, I think one of the ways I would suggest would be one is that keep changing your passwords. That's what I can say, because generally what we do is I have one app on my phone. I take the I mean I download the other app
Sure.
on my phone, and I would either use the Facebook login or the Google login, and because it is very convenient to me, and I don't want to remember multiple passwords. But then think about it, that if the app is coming free, and if you are just saying that yes to privacy, yes to all the access to your media, you are yourself giving access to it, and on top of that you are linking it to your Gmail and your Facebook. So if one of those things gets compromised, then I think all of that gets compromised. So that would be my suggestion on top of what all you have already covered.
Okay, thanks, Mitali. So different passwords on different platforms. That's your message to the audience.
Yes.
Uh, Mr. Cherian.
Well, I have a password manager, and at last count, I had 415 passwords stored on it. So, my password manager keeps informing me that some of them are been used, reused, and so on. So I think, I would swear by 2FA. I mean, it's like two-factor authentication. I think really makes a difference, and it is available with a lot of applications, with a lot of websites, but people still prefer convenience over security. That is the unfortunate thing, and also there's a lack of awareness about this availability. So yes.
Sure. So two-factor authentication, and don't compromise security by just going for convenience. Okay, so that's from you, Mr. Cherian. Thank you, Dr. Aarti.
They have already covered thing, but I would like to mention here that there is the need to develop a culture of that in each and every people, that whenever you are clicking anything, any button, anything, you think twice.
Great. I
Just
think great point.
don't click. Just don't click because it is coming something free to you and you will be in hurry. Whatever password you are having, all these things, people are, I think there's so much awareness we are creating. So people are knowing about that. More and more people going for online. But this culture has to be there. Whenever you are clicking, think before that. Don't just use and just go and do the things. That is my, I think, message.
Great point. So don't, I mean, think twice before clicking. Thank you, Dr.
Yes.
Arti. Ashutosh, final quick, we've got 15 seconds left.
Okay, so I just want to say the awareness is one time is okay, but maintain the situational awareness. That means the at least be aware what's going wrong into the cyberspace. So if you are aware that okay that this gov.in website or something like that, the phishing or spam is coming up, and you are aware of that, that's the first control and the defense against that. So maintain the situational awareness what's going wrong in the cyberspace to protect.
Sure. Thank you, Ashutosh. So, yes, maintain situational awareness. So, I think there are great points from all of you, and I think very, very interesting discussion we've all had. I've enjoyed it thoroughly, spending the last 45 minutes with all of you. So, thank you very much for joining. And, people who are in the audience really appreciate your time. And I think I hope you've benefited from this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this.